Hey YouTube, how's it going? We're looking at right now is a 2008 Honda CBR 125, and today I'll be doing a valve adjustment or valve clearance, whatever you want to call it, on this bike. If you've been following along, you know this is a bike that I picked up used, just had it for a couple days, and I'm kind of going through some maintenance issues so my wife can learn how to ride on a safe little motorcycle. So, valve clearance. Underneath here, obviously engine block, valve cover up here. This is really tricky to get to, really small bike. What I'm going to be doing is removing the, not removing, but undoing and moving forward the rad so I can get to the valve cover from underneath this way near the front wheel. Obviously the first step on this is to remove fairings. If you haven't done that already, or if you don't know how to, I do believe I have a video and you can watch that as well. Tools I'll be using for this job, just basically your standard screwdrivers, set of socket wrenches. I don't have all the measurements right now. I know you need at least a 10mm and a Phillips head screwdriver. Also using, well, these are actually some odd coins from different places, but something around the size of a Canadian loonie or an American $50 should work, and a set of pliers. And then the most important one, of course, is you need your feeler gauges for the valve adjustment. I'm also using a little drip pan because I will be removing some hoses on the radiator. The coolant's already been drained because I'm doing a bunch of work on this bike, so if you want to drain your coolant, you can follow this up with an oil filter clean, in which you have to drain the coolant anyway. If you don't want to do that, then you just might have to work in a bit more confined space. You'll see what I mean in a second. I'm going to start by loosening the coolant hose, the one that's coming from the bottom of the rad down over to the engine, and I'm going to pull that hose off, and that'll allow me some room so I can move the rad forward. As I said, the coolant's already drained. If the coolant wasn't drained, obviously the rad would be full and you'd be draining your entire system right now through this hose. Like I said earlier, that's not a bad thing if you want to keep doing a bit more maintenance. Here, if we take this cover off, which is not required for the valve adjustment, you can take the oil filter out and clean the oil filter. And to do that, you have to drain the oil and the coolant. That's what I'm going to do next. So I'm already prepped for that. If you want to do it, I mean, this is a good sequence to do it in. Start with the valves, and then you can do the oil filter after. I'm over here on the other side of the bike, and all I'm going to do is take a 10mm socket, it's a deep socket or an extender, on a wrench, and I'm just going to crack open this nut right here, which, or this bolt right here, which just keeps the rad nice and tight. And what that's going to allow me to do is swing it forward a little bit. I'm not going to take it out, I'm just going to crack it open about half a turn. And now you can see we can swing the rad forward, and it just gives us a bit more working room underneath there to get into that valve cover area. Now, I don't know if I have fat fingers or if I'm just being picky or what, but maybe I'm spoiled by my other Honda CX 500 where there's lots of room. So I'm not happy with how far that's swinging forward. I want to bring it forward even more, so I have more room to get underneath here. So I'm going to take off two more hoses. One is just this one right here with a clip, needle nose, and just pop it back. And the other one is going to be under the tank near your thermostat and the ECT sensor. So you're going to have to take off these two bolts. I believe they're 12mm. And once you do that, the tank will swing up. And then right here, we're going to take off that clamp and that hose, which connects to the other side of the rad. And once we do that, we can swing the rad much farther forward. Okay, so with all those hoses undone, I can swing the rad forward. Now this is pretty good. This is where it is normally with the bolt right here. Oh, I didn't mention that. There's a bolt right there you're going to have to take off. I had already undone it before. I believe it's 10mm. And now I can swing it all the way out to about there. So that's quite a good amount of room. The only thing to be careful in here is the fan. See these wires right here? They're not exactly easy to get out. So that's going to be your limiting factor right now. Don't pull too far or you could have a problem with those wires. And you know, I'm looking at this area here, and it's still pretty tight. I've just decided, you know, go big or go home. I'm going to take off the rad altogether because, hey, why not? This is, so you're going to have to undo the fan. Sorry, that's my neighbor mowing his grass. You might hear him. This is a 10mm bolt, and there's another one on the other side as well. I'm going to remove the fan, and I'm just going to tape it up, and I'm going to just get rid of this rad itself. So take off this bolt, take off the fan bolt on the other side. There's another one of these. And then we're going to just take out that bolt that we loosened earlier for the rad and just slide it right off and get it out of the way to give us more room. Okay, so now I got my pretty ghetto looking front end here, but I'm finally ready to start working on this valve cover. And to do that, I'm going to be working from the front, so kind of where the front tire is looking back, because now I've got all this awesome room right here. Make sure you take your spark plug cap out. It might get in the way as well. Just pop that off. And okay, so now we're cooking with gas. Now we got this whole area here to work with. It is a 6mm hex bolt. I'm just going to use a standard kind of L bracket type. You might have room for a socket there as well. I'm not sure. This should work fine for me. Let's see if I can point it out here. So you got two of them here. There's one top right, again bike dimensions, so facing forward, top right, and then bottom left, and we'll just undo that now with our hex. Alright, so I've got them loosened up. If you're taking them out, just remember that there's a washer on each one as well. I'm just going to leave mine there and just pop off the valve cover gently, ever so gently. Alright, so maybe it needs a little more than ever so gently. I'll go get my rubber mallet. Okay, there we go. Just a little TLC. Looks like the gasket's on there just a little tight. The gasket didn't really want to come off all that well. There's just a little kind of O-ring here that's also connected to the gasket. So I'm going to give this a good clean before I put it back on. It looks a little junky anyway. I'll go put that on my workbench. Alright, so there we go. That's the engine. There's only two valves. One exhaust, which is on this side. Of course, we know that because it's right next to the exhaust header, which is just a little bit below camera. The other one, which is on the other side, is the intake, and of course that's near the airbox, where your carb would normally be, but this is a fuel-injected bike. Okay, so I've moved over to the left side of the bike, and this is where we need to be for now, because before we do any work on the valves themselves, we gotta make sure that we're in the right stroke. Right, so 4-stroke engine, we want to be top dead center of the compression stroke. Of course, induction, compression, power, exhaust, so it's the second stroke. And in order to do that, we're going to have to take this cover off. Well, sorry, just the inspection ports right here and here. And we'll just align the engine where we need it to be and confirm it's in the right stroke, and then we can start adjusting the valves. Where a coin trick comes in, the first one I'm just going to take off right with a screwdriver. It's pretty narrow. But the second one, I mean, you could do it. It'll probably work, but just to make sure I don't strip it or do anything weird, I'm going to use this coin. I'm actually using what is this? It's some kind of Costa Rican coin. But like I said, a Canadian loonie or an American half-dollar size, maybe even a quarter should work. And I've just got it gripped here. And I'm going to turn it. Oh, she's on there tight. Alright, let's see what the screwdriver says. Nope, the screwdriver doesn't like it either, so I'm going to get something a little bit bigger to make sure I get the maximum amount of torque that I can. Okay, so I've tried just about everything, and I cannot get that cover off. You'll see there's a bit of stripping there that I've tried everything. I tried everything I have, can't get it out. There's really no reason for it to be that tight. This is like an oil filter kind of. It's really just an inspection port. It's got a rubber gasket. It shouldn't be on that tight. So, I mean, really, you have two options here. One option, which I will not do, is we could take off this left crankcase cover, and then we would have access to the bolt to turn it manually, but I'm not going to do that. That's way too much work. The other option is to rotate the rear wheel in gear, right? So this won't work at first or second gear. The gearing ratio is such that you just won't be able to turn it. You'll skid your tire. So pop your bike up into fifth or sixth gear if you have it. I'm going up to six, and then just basically walk it around until we look in this inspection port and we line it up, and that's what I'm going to do now. One more note is obviously when your bike's off and you're changing gears, you can't change it standing still. So hold the clutch lever in, right, and just walk your bike around your garage or the parking lot and change the gears with your foot. Okay, so I'm in sixth gear now. This is going to be a bit tricky to show on the camera. But anyway, I've switched the gear lever, walking the bike around with the clutch in. I'm in sixth gear. Now I've let go of the lever, and the clutch is now engaged. And what I'm just going to do is kind of walk it, step by step around the garage. But the whole time I'm going to be looking inside this inspection hole, and I'm going to be waiting for the T. On the CBR 125 there's a T and an F, and we want the T to be lined up in the hole. I'm also going to be looking over here at the valves, right? Because I believe we'll see this T twice in one 4-stroke cycle, right? One will be at the compression stroke, and one will be at the I believe it would be the exhaust stroke. So what I want to look for, again, this is the exhaust valve here, and back there is the intake valve. So it's intake, compression, power, exhaust. We want to be top of the compression stroke, which is right after the intake. So I'm going to be watching that intake spring, and when that intake valve opens, I know I'm at the intake stroke. The very next stroke will be compression. So as soon as that intake valve opens, the next one's going to be compression, and then as long as I'm lined up in here in the inspection port at that time, I would be at top dead center of the compression stroke. So I can't really show this that well. I'm going to walk the bike around. Once I get there, I'll turn the camera back on and show you what it looks like in this inspection port. Okay, all done. We're at the right, we're at the right part of the stroke right now. One thing I forgot to mention is never, ever, ever, ever go backwards on your bike while doing this maneuver with it in gear. It's fine if you have the clutch, lever in, or if you're in neutral, but when doing this, never go back when the engine is in gear. You can damage your timing chain or your cam chain guide or parts of your engine. So, alright, so it was a little hard to get there, and I missed it quite a bit. This is a very, very small flywheel, so it just rocked right by. And one thing you'll notice during the compression strokes, it's just a little bit harder to turn the engine at that point because there's compression being built, and then once that compression gets to the top, naturally it wants to release. So what I did to help alleviate that is over here on the right hand side of the bike, I just removed the spark plug, and now there's a hole right into the engine, and that compression is not built as much. So here's what it looks like. See if we can get this for you in there. That is going to be pretty hard to see. In fact, I don't think I can make it. And what you're looking for is a very small T with a line, and you're going to line that line up with a little tiny point below it. I can almost make it out there. So the F will come first, then the T. And again, you'll see those twice, so they could be the wrong one. The factory service manual also says you can confirm this by playing with the rocker arms, right? The rocker arms, and just see if there's a little bit of play in that. There shouldn't be any play in the exhaust stroke, but there should be some in the compression top dead center. So, yeah, there's a little bit of play, but I like to do it by watching the valves. So again, you'll see the exhaust, that's the exhaust stroke. Then you'll see the intake one down there move. And then right after the intake one closes, you'll be on your compression stroke. So at that time you can line up your T inside the wheel, and now we can get on to adjusting the valves, which is why we're here in the first place. So the first question, of course, is do my valves even need adjusting? So what we're looking at right here is the exhaust valve, and according to the factory service manual, let me just confirm this. Okay, so it's 0.06 millimeters for the intake and 0.27 millimeters, not mils, for the exhaust. Alright, just confirming that. So what I've got here, let's see if I can get it in focus. Alright, so this is what I'm using for my exhaust and then intake. So we're looking at the exhaust right now, so we'll check it first, and just in, it's right in the tappet there, so right below our rocker arm, in between the stem, and it looks like it might, oh, you know what, that's pretty good right there actually. So what you want is you want it to grab it just a little bit. It can't just slide in and out easily, and definitely it's got to get in there. So that was actually perfect for that. And I'm going to check my other valve, the intake valve. But before I do, I'll just give you the theory. So just because it's easier to get the camera on this shot, when you have to adjust it, you've got your lock nut, which is right here. It's a 10 millimeter. Actually, this one's fitting 9 millimeter for me. Sorry, it's a 9 millimeter. And on the top, you've got just a flathead screwdriver. So the idea is, I'm not going to do it, you want to undo the lock nut. Alright, so this lock nut spins freely just a little bit, and then you'll use your flathead screwdriver at the top there just to tighten it. Will make the valve clearance smaller, and loosening it will open it up. Once you've got it to the place that you want with your gauge, you're going to tighten it again, and it will probably move a bit when you tighten it, so you might have to account for that. And then once it's all tight again, hand tight, insert your feeler gauge again, just to make sure that it's still within limits. So I'm going to do that right now to my intake valve on the other side, and it's got too much of a gap. I checked it, and we'll have to shorten it down and snug it down. Okay, so what we're looking at now is a different angle, but this is the intake valve. I'm going to adjust that now. I'm going to be doing it from the left-hand side of the bike through the tank area. Alright, so that's just about right there. It's important to kind of keep it moving. You really shouldn't be tightening your tappet down while your feeler gauge is in there, but it's such a small area that I'm going to take the risk. Alright, that's just about perfect there. So I will just tighten up the lock nut, recheck the clearance, and that should be it. Alright, so it is tight. And it is good. It's always, remember that it's always better to have valves that are a little bit too loose, which will just mean a bit more noise, rather than too tight. If it's too tight, that means burnt valves. But if it's too loose, it just means there'll be a little bit of noise when that tappet hits the valve stem. So, alright, we're good to go. Now everything's done. There's a lot of stuff that has to be put back together because really I went maybe a little overboard on this, but you know what, if I had to do a lot of work under here, I would have been glad that I took all this stuff out and made it clear and free. So, installation is the opposite of removal. Thanks for watching. I hope you appreciate it. Check out my other CBR 125 videos and be sure to subscribe if you like what you saw here today.